abilities. And boom, see my screen?
Those are two very good-looking individuals, I have to say.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Dennis, for the introduction, and Alteryx for inviting us to this webinar. I want to first start by saying I hope everyone on the call is safe and healthy. I know it's not the easiest times to be working, but hopefully this is going to be an interesting webinar and a fun webinar and a good time during the day. Now, I can't promise, we've all dealt with the challenges of working from home, so I can't promise you won't hear any dogs barking or Wi-Fi will not cut in or out, but we'll do our best to make sure that we don't become a meme on the internet. So once again, yeah, Dennis, thank you very much for having us to this webinar. I think it's a really relevant topic. You know, most recently, CPA Canada has just updated their competency map to make data and analytics even more relevant than what it previously was. I think that goes to show how important the skill of data and analytics and how it's integrated in the various financial roles the company has, how important that is moving forward. I'm looking at the students that are coming out of university and the skill sets they have, and it blows my mind what they're able to do. So I think that it's important to make sure that companies keep up with these students that are coming out, making sure that they have the right tools to be able to do the most up-to-date analyses, and to also to be able to do a lot of the automation and improving the Office of Finance as they come in and help, you know, leverage the data that's available. That being said, I want to take a quick second to introduce ourselves. My name is Scott Carr. I'm a manager in data analytics at KPMG. I'm not going to lie, I'm not a CPA or a CFI. I'm really more on the data side. I came up learning a couple programming languages, SAS, SQL, Python, but now I've kind of transferred a little bit more over to Alteryx because we can use it better between ourselves as the data professionals and working with all the different departments in KPMG, audit, tax, and advisory. We work on a wide variety of projects with a bunch of different teams, and for us, it really allows us to speak in a common language. I'll hand it over to Michael, who's actually our accountant on the line.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael. I started off at KPMG in 2015, so I'm a CPA auditor. I had done 4 years in audit and then said to myself, I want to be able to use my accounting and finance knowledge to kind of help our clients develop more efficient ways to do business. So I come from more of an accounting background. I also teach the CPA program at McGill University in Montreal, and like Scott alluded to, we're really trying to revitalize our curriculum and to implement tools like Alteryx in the curriculum so that we can have better and smarter students coming into the workforce. The one thing that I'll start off by saying is that when I started with Scott's department, he spoke to me about Alteryx, and I was like, oh my God, analytics, this is going to be really complicated. And I have been with Scott for about 8 months now in his group, and let me tell you, Alteryx has been the easiest software to learn, and we're really looking forward to showing you guys how you can implement Alteryx in the finance groups that you work in. So I guess with that said, let's do this.
I'm glad to hear that Alteryx was easier to learn than the Gap. Perfect. So let's jump into the next slide. So I wanted to start with an analogy, and if we take a look way back when the pyramids were built, you know, how long did it actually take to build the pyramids? And they estimated that it took about 4,000 workers, 20 years, working 261 days. I want to be conservative here, giving 8 hours a day. And really the tools that they used were sleds, ropes, and just their brute strength. And the total amount of time it took was 167 million hours of work. Recently, a French architect actually wanted to calculate, you know, if we wanted to build the pyramids today, how long would it take in comparison? And using a different set of tools, so using vehicles, cranes, helicopters, and all the other wonderful tools we had available, he estimated as follows. It would take 2,000 workers, 5 years, 261 days a year. That's basically how many working days there are. So we're being generous here. We're not going to make them work on weekends. And 8 hours a day. The total estimate was 20.9 million hours of work. And what that really equates to, it's an 87% time saved just by changing the tools that we use.
Yeah, but Scott, let's be real. If we're in Montreal or Toronto, it's definitely going to be way longer than that.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I can only imagine what it would be like trying to build the pyramids in Montreal. It certainly would take more than 20.9 hours as estimated. But that's okay. But the point that we're trying to make here is that using the right tools really, really can create a lot of time savings. So when we think about the accounting and finance office, we need to rethink also the tools that we use.
Exactly. So we've seen quite an evolution in finance, tax, and accounting. If we look at 1,000, 2,000 years ago, we used to count with fingers and stones. And that was really great until we got to numbers up to 10. And then we're like, now we got to use our toes, and that just caused a whole pack of issues. So then we moved on to the abacus, and that was good, but it lacked efficiency. It was complicated to learn. Not everybody really understood how to use it. And then the third thing that we started to use, especially this century, is obviously the calculator. Calculator was great. We can do some mid-level calculations, but then we saw, if we talk about finance, if we want to do mortgage calculations, securities, we're going to need something a little bit more rigorous and powerful. So that's kind of what led us to Excel. And Excel, for the longest time, was the king when it came to finance, tax, and accounting. Anything numbers related, Excel was the king of all kings. But at the end of the day, we started to see that almost 90% of Excel spreadsheets, even today, contain at least one error. And okay, that could just be a color, or maybe it's a copy paste or a typo. But just here's a couple of quick use cases that have really shown that this could be a catastrophe. So number one, JP Morgan. So JP Morgan saw that because one of their employees copy pasted the wrong formula, they underestimated the downside of a synthetic credit portfolio. And for those of you who are not CFAs, like myself, all I see is $6.5 billion in losses because of a bad copy paste. Let me tell you, that makes me panic. Number two, Barclays, so another bank in the UK. And what they did is that because they hid rows instead of deleting rows, that miscalculation in the Excel, which I'm sure we have all seen before when we do sum instead of subtotal, they ended up accepting 179 additional unfavorable contracts, especially with Lehman Brothers. So that caused other billions of dollars in losses. And number three, which I think is the coolest one, the UK Secret Service, right? MI5. For those of you who are James Bond fans, I guess that's MI6. But anyway, what they saw is that because there was an incorrect manual input in an Excel, those famous plug and manual adjustment things that we see in the finance world, MI5 actually bugged over 1,000 wrong cell phones because of that manual input error. And those are ones that we can't even see. Now, we're all familiar with things like the ref, the NA, and the value, or my personal favorites. Microsoft Excel, it just stops working. And that is literally the worst of the worst. When you're spending an hour, you don't save, and then you see that, you just think to yourself, my God, there has to be a better way. Scott?
And at KPMG, we have tons of needs, and we realized, exactly like you're saying, a lot of the things we needed to do, Excel just couldn't quite provide us what we needed. And we were realizing the needs that we were having were very similar needs that our clients were having. And we're going to walk you through a couple of those. So first, reconciliations. The truth is we're pulling information from a bunch of different spreadsheets, a bunch of different even data sources, some being on spreadsheets, some being in text files. And we're trying to incorporate complicated formulas. And that may be, formulas on basic spreadsheets may be okay, but as soon as you're pulling in from different spreadsheets, we start to get to the point where, okay, well, what if a path changes? Or what if we have a small adjustment being made? We started to run into a couple problems there. Next, the pre-processing. Oh my Lord, the amount of time it is spent doing the same manipulations over and over again in Excel in order to get to the point where you can make the analysis. This took up way too much time. The other thing that we noticed is there's tons of constant requests of changes. So you can imagine yourself we need to do this analysis, we do it in a certain way in Excel, and then all of a sudden the client comes back and says, hey, I actually want to completely change the way that we're doing this or change one variable, and all of a sudden, oh, well, we have to start from scratch and it's going to take hours and hours and hours to do. So we're realizing that that doesn't really work because oftentimes we're reinventing the way that we do things, and we need an ability to do that dynamically, quickly, and repeatably. And the last one was scalability. You know what the truth is that Excel was great when we had a little bit simpler calculations, but we're realizing as the number of lines that we need to analyze is constantly increasing, we all see to that point wherever you get past a certain number of lines, your VLOOKUPs start crashing. Excel doesn't work. Like Michael said, next thing you know, you lose 30 minutes of work because you didn't save your work and Excel is no longer responding. Also, your complexity of your formulas are increasing. And in accounting, finance, and tax, the truth is we have regulatory bodies that we need to abide by. And them coming in and you saying, well, I kind of filter and pivot, and this is how I get to it, it doesn't really create a traceability across the entire way that you do things. So for us, our solution was Alteryx. And the really big thing behind Alteryx, that why we think it's so powerful, is it creates transparency and flexibility in data processing, and we stay in control of our data from source to conclusion. So I can look throughout the entire process with Michael, sitting down side by side, and be able to understand what happens in each step of the data process. Not only that, is the ability to do more complicated things is also there. So the audit trail is clearly visible, and I think that's why a lot of organizations are starting to move towards this kind of self-service, visually appealing, low-code environment, because people like Michael can pick it up, but people like myself, who's a little bit more analytics and wants more advanced capabilities, it's also there as well. So for us, Alteryx is kind of the best of both worlds that allows us to work together. And the truth is that the financial office is also transforming. When you think of the tasks that you do every day, you have to think, if you're doing something over and over and over again, and you're starting to wonder, there must be a better way of doing this, it's probably because there is a better way of doing it. You just don't have the right tools to do it right now. And what we're seeing is 61% of the activities can either be mostly automated, if not fully automated. And I want to make a point here, is that a lot of people are like, wait, I'm going to lose my job. This is, my job's just going to get automated. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think when you talk about most functions being automated, it has to do with making sure that, all the manual things that you're doing that anyone can do, that's what we're automating. So it gives you a better opportunity to actually create value add work. And second, when you're a finance person, you also always have to think about cost. So we're seeing a lot of cost savings in terms of just repetitive work that could be automated at this point in time. And then you can deploy your individuals better on more strategic projects.
So the next main question is, okay, well, how do we as KPMG use Alteryx in our day-to-day work to enable transformation? But at the same time, how can we help our clients who are often, finance departments at big, small, medium-sized companies, startups, to help transform the way that they do business as well? So that leads us, Scott, the next slide, to explaining how Alteryx is our engine. So let's take a look at the reporting function. And this is financial reporting. This could be financial statement generation, but it can also be strategic pricing. This could be financial planning and analysis, FP&A, treasury, and all that kind of stuff. And to Scott's point from earlier, we've been seeing that way too much time is spent updating reports and dashboards, which really we don't need highly skilled people to just update reports if we can do it manually. We can get those people, train them, and have them do more value add work. So the first step that we see is that we'll go into a client's finance function, and we see that they have 8 different financial systems, one for inventory, one for strategy, one for HR, one for sales, and we have to get all that data into one easy to digest format. And so what we found with Alteryx is that we're able to clean, consolidate, and transform the data in an easy way that can be repeated. So once we build out the workflow, we can just substitute the inputs, and the cleaning, consolidation, and transformation is done automatically every other month. And then the next step is that once we're able to clean the data and export it, Alteryx is really good. They have an excellent export tool, which allows us to export directly into other visualization softwares. For example, we use Tableau at KPMG, and there's a really quick and easy link to get that right into Tableau. And then at the end of the day, as it's more visual, we see that it minimizes the time between getting the data available, doing the analysis, and then presenting it to the higher up decision leaders. They don't want to see the detail. They want to have confidence in their data, and they want to be able to make decisions that are smarter decisions. And as a result, because we're substituting all of the employee labor time to updating reports and now doing deeper analyses, our employees are able to have more value add rather than just copy pasting formulas.
And Michael, to your point, I think it's a really important put out is that there's a lot of different softwares and analytics that exist out there. We talk about visualization software like Tableau and Power BI, which we use at KPMG, but we also integrate it with Alteryx. So it's not an or factor. It's for us, it's and. It's using the right tool at the right time. And when people ask us, how do we use Alteryx? For us, it really falls into that, bringing the data in, cleaning it up, creating that analysis, and getting it to the point where I'm just directly clicking a button. It automatically outputs to Tableau or Power BI. And I don't even actually need to change anything in Tableau or Power BI. The visualizations are automatically updated. This entire process has gone from, days, hours to minutes of updating your financial reports or different reports that you want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So from here, we're going to walk you through 3 different cases, each, finance, accounting, tax-related cases of things that a professional would have to do, and projects that we've had to work on, how Alteryx has helped us, how we've worked with Alteryx to simplify these processes. The first one, it's a case where we had to build financial scenarios for pricing. So it's a B2B enterprise. They have over 30,000 different SKUs. They operate all across Canada, and they wanted to completely update their pricing strategy. So the issue at hand was their sales were going up, their volumes were stagnating. We figured out the reason for this was their volume per customer was going down because the pricing it wasn't adapted properly to the market. So they needed a completely new pricing strategy, and they needed a way to easily and quickly run scenarios to see the impact on profitability of those pricing strategies. The issue at hand was they had 6 million lines of transactional data that needed to be integrated in these scenarios. And we also worked with them to create this pricing strategy, which needed to incorporate, the sales team's insights as well as different insights from different departments. To give you a brief overview of what we did. So the first thing that we had to do was we had to help them bring their data together, and their data was across a bunch of different systems. So here's very simply what it looked like. We brought in a couple different data sources. And here's the quick wins that we had. So first, in 15 minutes, they sent us the data, we imported, validated, and realized that in some of the reports, they were actually double counting certain transactions, which to us it's a good example of an easy win. Sometimes it takes forever, to get the data, bring it all together in Excel or whatever you're using or SQL. But for us, it was quick and easy, drag and drop, and some visuals, and we saw right away that they were double counting. So that was a win. And within an hour, we started just quickly looking through. We're trying to see data completeness. Is there anything that's appearing as weird? And we immediately started to flag irregular transactions from certain salespeople, prices that just didn't make sense. They were like, we think they're actually errors, but they were salespeople that were giving huge rebates that they shouldn't have been. So right away there, we started to see value again. And the third thing, by the end of the first day, we had merged transaction data, customer data, rebate data, vendor data, and even data from different websites that kind of created a holistic view of what their company was doing. And this was the first time that they were able to do this, ever. So this is a good example of, when we talk about Alteryx and we talk about the ease of use and speed of use, for them, it was really about being able to go from, here's our data, there's a bunch of things we need to integrate. They were working off an SQL base, and they were like, we would have never been able to do that without something that was so easy and so simple to bring everything together really simply. The next thing we needed to do was segment the customers. And And the current process was there was a bunch of micro markets. They basically had created all different kinds of little markets that each had their own pricing across the 30,000 different SKUs. And that didn't work. So we sat down with their sales team and figured out that, okay, well, we need to restructure based off of where their customers are and where their competitors are. This is kind of the before and after. And the next thing we needed to do was we need to work with them to identify customer segments. Because at the end of the day, your top customers should be getting certain benefits that your smallest customers don't necessarily. So from this standpoint, we very quickly took their customers, aggregated them. Here it was as compares to a total sales as compared to your percentage of your total customers. And they were saying that, hey, wait a second, 50% of our sales force's time is spent on these customers who are buying 1 to 10 units annually. And at the end of the day, that isn't where our focus should be. So once again, this kind of really allowed us to figure out who do we focus on, how do we do this? And the next thing, of course, was running the different scenarios. To do that, the first thing we needed to do was create 10 modifiable input that is provided by different departments. These inputs were, geographies specific to individual customers. So all the different sales teams could adjust their individual customers across the board, and they could adjust the amounts of rebates that we're getting. They could adjust certain prices, pretty much a fully customizable solution. All of this was then run through Alteryx. So all these 10 inputs were brought in, and accordingly, in 10 minutes, you could go from these modifiable inputs all the way down to your approximate profitability, as well as visualizations of which customers are most impacted, which customers are going to be positively impacted, which ones are going to see price increases. And accordingly, they could spend a lot more time perfecting the inputs rather than actually running these scenarios. So this is a good example of Alteryx taking this process in Excel that just wouldn't be doable on that kind of scale. 6 million lines that are analyzed each time with a bunch of different variations that, once again, could easily be repeated.
So that's a really good example of how we can use Alteryx in a little bit more of a complex scenario to identify major risk areas. But there are also even simple, quick wins that every single finance function in every company on the planet can use and can make this process a lot faster. One of the ones that we help our clients implement regularly is simplification of the age receivables function. And so for those of you who are not, from the accounting or the, CPA world, aging receivables just means that there's a list of all of the accounts receivables that customers owe you for things that you sold to them. And an aging receivables report will demonstrate how many customers are not past due, 30 days past due, 60 days past due, 90 days, et cetera, et cetera. And the customers who are more past due, well, those are most likely customers that you're going to follow up with to make sure that they pay you. So what we see is that the regular process is manual. And it's usually done once a quarter. And the process is, well, we go into our systems, whether it's SAP, QuickBooks, Hyperion, whatever, and we extract the data. And then we put them in Excel. We do some filters, we do some calculations, we copy the calculations from the previous Excel file, and then we say, okay, you know what, let's identify everybody who is, 90 days past due. And then let's say it's 150 emails. Well, that means that your accounts receivable staff is going to have to type out, copy paste 150 emails to 150 different people. Easy.
Everyone laughs and think that this isn't true, but I've seen it. This happens regularly.
I come from industry before KPMG. I've seen it firsthand at a big multinational company, and it happens all the time. And so what we say is that with Alteryx, all of this, or 95% of it, can be automated. So first of all, Alteryx can plug directly into the system and extract the data right away instead of having your IT people having to come and having 15 USB sticks and compiling the Excel. None of that. Alteryx is a direct connection. And then because you've prepared the workflow in the previous quarter, all you got to do is refresh your Alteryx workflow with the new data, and all of the same parameters are there, and you immediately identify the high-risk clients saving hours and hours of work. Now, you will want to have some manual checks because, garbage in is garbage out. If you made a mistake in the formula, you want to still be sure that you're doing the check, which can take an hour, but you're still saving a couple of days of work. And then finally, once you're comfortable with everybody that needs to be followed up with, the emails can be sent automatically through Alteryx. And the beauty here is that since Alteryx is pulling the data directly from your database, it can also pull the email address. So there's no more copy pasting of emails. There's no more typos in the email address. It's all done automatically through Alteryx.
And Michael, if I'm not mistaken, the email is even customized to the individual and to the aging receivable that they're seeing. So this really simplifies a lot of the process.
Exactly. It's not a generic email that says, hello, Mr. and or Mrs. You have a past due account from ABC. No, it's really, hello, John Jane Smith. This is the date that your last invoice was. This is your invoice number. This is what you bought. This is the amount. It's all taken automatically, which is a huge time saver. And it allows you to still personalize and customize your email to your clients.
Amazing.
And then the third business case that we want to take a look at is what we have to deal with a lot, especially when we deal with riskier files. So when you want to do a due diligence process, and you might want to do, let's say, background checks on customers, or you're dealing with, compensation information or performance reviews, you want to be sure that if you have to send this data, that it's all anonymized. So for example, client 1 will be Scott, client 2 will be Michael, and you want to be able to retrace the identities later on, but restricted only to your department. And the other thing that we see is that sometimes, because we have different documents and different files, sometimes Scott's name will be Scott Carr, Scott A. Carr, S. Carr, Scott Andrew Carr. Oh, I didn't know that your middle name was Andrew. That's funny. And then, we have to find an easy way to tell the system all of these different ways of spelling Scott's name. That's all Scott. And so Alteryx can help with that as well. And then, of course, the names of clients that need to be replaced will be, modified with an anonymous string. So we start with the initial list, and let's say in the case of this example, we had over 15 Excel documents that needed to be adjusted. And we've all been there.
Isn't this like Control F, find all and replace all? Sounds like a great solution.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Honestly, it's literally, we've all been there doing the Control F, select all, highlight duplicates, remove, and then that's great and that's easy to do, I guess, but it's really long. And if anybody has to check your work, it's impossible. There's no audit trail. I don't know what my colleague does, and there's a really big risk of human error. Now, with Alteryx, what we can do is that we can start off with a master list of clients that has duplicates and different versions of the name. So Scott Carr, Scott Andrew Carr, etc. And then once we have that, we can use what's called the fuzzy match tool and the formula tool. And we ask Alteryx, okay, Alteryx, give me all of the Scott Carr and Scott Carr similarities that are probably Scott. And do that with a, 95% accuracy rate. So Alteryx will do this fuzzy match tool and will take SCOT, well, that's probably Scott. SCOTTY, well, that's probably Scott. And SCATT, that's probably also Scott. So instead of us having to do Control F, find, replace, that's all done automatically with Alteryx. And like I said, it's faster. But more importantly, if your manager or your director wants to review, there's an audit trail, and I can see exactly what my colleagues have done to see if there are any errors in the workflow, which would be corrected before we send it off to the client.
It's like a VLOOKUP with some intelligence.
It's an intelligent VLOOKUP with really far fewer NAs and refs. And I guess the last thing that we'll talk about when it comes to anonymizing due diligence documents is that at the end of the day, everything that needs to be confidential stays confidential. So the output is anonymized financial documents and compensation and performance reviews and client personal information. It's a hot topic, right? Data privacy is a huge hot topic, and it's going to start at the source. And if we develop proper processes to make sure our data is protected, then it'll stay protected.
Can't agree more. So maybe just to summarize, some of the things that we're seeing here. So the first one is, from all of these examples, whether it be, pricing scenarios that we're dealing with, or these, big control Fs that we're trying to deal with, we're not limited by the scale of information available. So no matter how many lines we have, Alteryx can kind of crunch it. A lot of these procedures are being automated, and from examples that we've talked about today, it's a lot about time saving and giving back time to these individuals who at the end of the day have a very big expertise to bring to the table. There's some advanced features. We talked about the fuzzy match. We talked about a couple of the other advanced features that Alteryx provides. So it's not just I can do the same thing that Excel can. It's I can do even more than what Excel can. And last, like we were saying, it really comes down to creating value add activities. So I think the question at hand is, so why are business leaders so hesitant to buy into these data related transformations? And it's something that, we at KPMG deal with regularly, because it's true. We get a little bit of okay, but I have some issues, and here are some of the issues that CEOs are dealing with. And I think it comes down to trust. So 75% of DA pros lack confidence in their ability to manage complexities of data analytics. And I think that's pretty telling. And, coming from a background that, worked in SQL, Python, even SAS, when you're doing a lot of these programming, it becomes very hard to manage, I find, particularly when we talk about, reviewing another person's work. I find it really, really difficult to review another person's code. But when we're reviewing drag and drop, it's a lot more straightforward. If we skip through a couple of these, 35% of CEOs have limited trust in the accuracy and effectiveness of the way their organization uses data analytics. 78% have concerns about the quality of the data which they base their decisions. There's a lot of components to this that's going on. So I think what you need to do is create trust. And for us, we think of it in the anchors of trust in analytics. So first of all, data quality, like we gave in the example of the pricing example, taking a look at a lot of data and very quickly being able to analyze if there's duplicates, if there's data quality issues. There is a component there that Alteryx can help with that, from what I've seen is quite useful. Resilience is your analytics process identify irregularities. So has your workflow actually been set up in a way that, if an irregularity exists, it's being flagged and you can look at it quickly. Transparency, and I think this is one of the biggest ones. Can the right people understand every step in the analytics process? And when we talk about, tax, accounting, finance, not everyone is going to be an analytics expert, but the question is, does the individual who has the tax understanding, can they look at the analytics that you're doing and understand it from A to Z? And in my experience, when taking a look at something like, a code, it's not the easiest to understand. But when we sit together with, Michael and I regularly sit together and look at workflows, it's really quick for me to understand what he's doing or for him to understand what I'm doing. And the last one, effectiveness. Does it consistently perform as intended? Are the right safeguards in place to easily validate? And for us, this is, a big one about methodology and how we work. So overall, what we're seeing is to create transformations and really to get the most out of your data, you have to create trust. And there's a couple of anchors there. So to summarize, we talked about a lot today, but for us, what are the key success factors for analytics software in the financial office? We think there's 4. So first, advanced functionality across the analytics spectrum. You got to be able to do a lot. Excel has its limitations now, and we are pushing the boundaries of what we need to do in every day. 2, things need to be repeatable and adjustable. We can't have things that we do once, and if there's a mistake, we have to go back and start from scratch. We need to be able to adjust it dynamically throughout the entire process. And the workflow that you saw at the beginning with Chris, it provides that option. Last, speed and consistency. We need to be able to do things fast and do things properly. And last, for us, the big one here is a universal language. So we talk about these Alteryx as a translation tool, as being able to work between an analytics professional, an accounting professional, and maybe a CEO that also needs to understand what's going on. So overall for us, it's about bringing together these four things to really transform the finance and accounting office and create innovations there. With that being said, we do have some time for Q&A, but we do want to thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. And if you have additional questions or you want to reach out or you want to find out more about this, I lead the Alteryx Montreal user group. That means we're a bunch of data nerds that absolutely love what we do. And we just get together and, have a pizza, have a drink, and talk about the use cases that we do across the board. So if ever you want to reach out, if ever you want to join the user group or come by and speak with us, please feel free. And if you have additional questions about what we do, please don't hesitate.
So I think there are already some questions in the chat box. The first one that we'll get to is from Stacy. She asks, is KPMG using this tool to audit clients? So I can speak to that. I was part of the audit innovation team during my time in that group. Yes, we are using the software to audit clients. The way that it works is that we have certain functionalities that are approved. So, for example, we will do things that's called a three-way match. So for those of you who are not auditors, basically what a three-way match is that we have to be sure that if a company says that it sold something, well, that the sale actually took place. And so what we do is that we say, if the sale took place, that would mean that the customer paid for the goods that were delivered. So if we're able to match every single sale to every single cash received by the customer, well, then obviously the customer bought that product. So that's one of the ways that we will use Alteryx to audit clients. This is not replacing the work that we do. It's actually helping us get better coverage. So if you're an auditor, for those of you who are in the audit profession, sometimes you'll do a sample of maybe 100 sales. Alteryx allows us to do maybe 98% of all sales of the year. So it's really helping us reduce our risk. There's another question.
Michael, to your point, our group works with the audit group. The audit group is starting to use some of these analytics functions, and it's a constant collaboration. So like we talked about, we couldn't go to the audit group with a code and say, here's an analysis we did, but we can go to them with an Alteryx workflow and walk through with them and explain to them each step of the way what we're doing and what they want to integrate then further. So it's a really dynamic process for us in our group.
Exactly. There's a question about, is there a license required for Alteryx? Any ideas on cost? So when it comes to the cost, I would encourage you to reach out to your Alteryx account executives. We can really comment on that. We're not sure. But yes, there is a license that's required. It's not a free software. And we'll get to a little bit more of the benefits of that in a moment.
I think there are trial periods.
Yeah, it's Dennis jumping in. There indeed is a 14-day trial period. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to go Google Alteryx 14-day trial. You'll get to the link and you can do the download. And as well, in the chat, I did post the link where everybody can go and see the pricing information for Alteryx. So everything's transparent. It's on our website, and you'll find it in the chat. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.
Perfect. Thanks, Dennis. There was another question that says, each Access database has a 2 gig size limit. So is there any restrictions in Alteryx in terms of size, input, and number of files? That's a good question. I don't actually know the answer. I know that I've used files that are way bigger than 2 gigs in the past, 40 gigs, for example. Maybe, Scott, you can answer that one.
I haven't found the limit yet. I'll be honest. The only limits I've found is workflows that really take a long time because we're dealing with predictive capabilities. But other than that, I mean, maybe some of the Alteryx people can say that, but I mean, to the point, I haven't hit the limit, and we've dealt with some pretty huge databases. I haven't hit the terabyte size yet, but Alteryx, is there any comment on that?
Hey guys, this is Chris Smallwood. So the only thing I suggested was that it's really a limitation on your physical machine itself. So, we'll load into memory all the data that we can. And then at some point, we may have to swap out to disk. But as far as the Alteryx application goes, there's no limit on the data size it's going to be able to read in.
Perfect. Next question from William. Considering CPA background and zero formal analytics training, how did you scale up quickly to gain proficiency on Alteryx? Yeah, so It's a good question. I had no idea what analytics was when I started with Scott. And really, there are a couple of really good trainings online. Alteryx has the the core certified, for example, certification that you can do. There's a lot of really good trainings. And when I did get stuck, I'll be honest, the Alteryx community, the forum online, is a phenomenal resource. Let me tell you, anything that you're doing at Alteryx, you're not the first one. You post it on the community, and I would say I would post a complex Alteryx question, and in 6 minutes, I got an answer straight to my email. It's insane. So I highly encourage you guys to check out the Alteryx community. There's some really good resources there, and help is always available at Hogwarts to those that ask for it.
Hey, Michael, thank you very much for that. It's Dennis. Thought I'd chime in. Everybody, I'm going to be sending an email out to you with the recording. I will also make sure that I include the link for Alteryx community. Another thing that I'd like to add is that on the Canadian team and at Alteryx generally, we're really big on enablement. We run weekly webinars on enablement every Monday. So we have a schedule for that and a very good guide which goes through how to get started with Alteryx. I'll make sure that everybody has a copy of that PDF in the follow-up email that I will be sending out.
Great.
So thanks, Dennis.
So we got a couple more minutes. There's a couple last questions here. From my conversations with finance and data teams in tech companies, most still prefer open source solutions such as Python, mostly due to costing significantly cheaper compared to procuring software. How have you overcome challenges on recommending Alteryx? So
I can take that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's true, and I've been in the situation where a lot of companies are still using these code-based solutions, and you can do that. But the issue I find is that you run into the challenge that you rely a lot on the individuals who have a very deep expertise in coding. And it's not that easy to pick up. And a lot of these processes in coding are very, very manual, and they're lengthy. So at the end of the day, from my experience, you're going to spend a lot of time creating this code and adjusting these codes. And if someone leaves, the process is going to start all over again, learning this code, rewriting this code, adjusting it to the individual. So in my experience, if you have a super, super, super advanced data team, great. It may be more efficient for certain capabilities, but when it comes to something that can be implemented across different departments and individuals that are not necessarily, people that have been working 15 years in data analytics and coders and computer science or computer engineers, Alteryx is a really great solution to create that translation tool between experts and data analytics people.
Next one, what is the advantage of Alteryx for finance department just getting into digital transformation? So that's a really good question, Alexander. Thank you. So we see this very often, actually, especially with bigger companies that are trying to be more efficient. And I would say the easiest, the quickest win is taking your week-long reporting process and condensing it into 3/4 of a day, or 1 full day of work. You have Alteryx workflows. All you do is you replace the input files with the new quarter. You do a refresh, and Alteryx does all the work. So that is I would say the quickest win for a finance department getting into digital. And Scott, do you want to tackle the last question?
Sure. Go ahead. What was it?
Do you have any predictive analytics use cases that you implemented with Alteryx for any KPMG client?
Definitely. We've implemented a couple of different use cases for predictive analytics, whether it be, customer churn has been one that we've implemented. So looking at what components of the customer journey create that a client's so irritated that it's going to leave. This is a good one. We have a couple different ones, and we can talk about this a little bit offline, but I think what I'd like to pivot that into, talk a little bit more about, is Alteryx's ability to help you with predictive analytics with something called assisted modeling. So at the end of the day, I'm not a PhD in statistics. I don't necessarily know everything there is to know about predictive analytics, but Alteryx does have a really cool functionality, which is you drag and drop kind of all your data in, you tell it what you want to predict, and it'll run a wide variety of models and tell you which one you should or shouldn't use. But once again, for someone that's coming up and not necessarily the most experienced in this particular field, and the truth is most people aren't, it gives you a really good ability to quickly go from your data to a predictive predictive output and be able to analyze that and kind of easily interpret it.
Perfect. So I guess that brings us to the end. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation, for your enthusiasm in the Q&A. Please reach out to us if you have any questions. Add us on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to walk through any other use cases like Scott mentioned, or any other things that you'd like to talk about when it comes to Alteryx.
Let's not come by the user group the next time we meet.
Yeah, exactly. The last thing I'll say is that we don't work for Alteryx. We're not paid by Alteryx for this webinar. We are sharing this with you because we really believe in the power of the tool, and we really want to try to encourage our colleagues across the industry to just work differently and to think differently.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.
Scott, Michael, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing today. And thank you, everybody on the call for investing time out of your lunch hour. Really appreciate it. And as I mentioned, I will be getting some information out to all the users. Have a great day, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Michael. Have a good day.